with this, we move to a very uh, interesting session, one of the most important sessions of the day. Uh, we are living in a digital age, and to live in a digital age, we have to secure the digital data, digital world as well, especially when we talk about governments. And this session is all about securing cyber world in a digital age. And we have with us eminent speakers from the various parts of the country, law enforcement officers, PSU leaders, and experts. We have with us Mr. Harmeet Singh, Commissioner of Police, Guwahati, and Special DGP Assam. A huge round of applause for him. We have with us Mr. Jaspal Singh, Director General of Police, Goa. Huge round of applause for him as well. We have with us Mr. Amit Sinha, ADG and Director, Information Technology Development Agency, Government of Uttarakhand. A huge round of applause for him, please. We have with us Mr. Rohit Rajbir Singh, SP Crime and SIT, Government of Arunachal Pradesh. We welcome Mr. Singh. We have with us Mr. George Kuruvilla, Chairman and Managing Director, Broadcast Engineering Consultants India Limited, popularly known as BECIL. A huge round of applause for him, please. We have with us another young officer, Mr. Karthik Hegadakatti. He is the Deputy Secretary, Department of Personnel and Training, Government of India. A huge round of applause for him. And by the way, he is now a known author. He is known for his sci-fi novels and also a blockchain expert, if I'm not wrong. And with this, I request Mr. Rajneesh, the consulting editor, who will be playing the role of moderator of this session, to come on stage, please. Over to you, Rajneesh. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shobik. So before we start, I'd just like to emphasize on the structure of discussion we would like to have. Basically, once we talk about cyber crimes and cybersecurity related aspect, specifically Indian context, let's broadly break it up into three parts. One, the overall global picture and the issues like cyber terrorism or cyber espionage that are coming up. And we had Rajesh Pant in the earlier session previous to lunch touching upon some of the global aspects. The second aspect that we would like to talk is basically what we have seen in the Indian context is it's not that since there are so many law enforcement agencies present on the dais, it's not that people, the cyber criminals are not getting arrested. There are a lot of arrests happening, and the cyber crimes are getting detected. Unfortunately, the rate of conviction is still not proportionate. So we would like to explore what's the lacuna there. And the third part is ultimately how are the security professionals properly trained, especially in the law enforcement agencies, other government departments, since security is a fast-moving and dynamic subject. There are new technologies coming, and we all know criminals are always ahead. So are the government professionals and the law enforcement professionals, are they properly trained? We would like to touch upon that aspect also. So with that, we would like to break it up into three parts. And so my first question will be, I will start with Assam, Harmeet Singh. One, where we talked about that there is still a gap in the rate of conviction. So are the IPC or the CRPC, the provisions there, and the IT law provisions, which the last speaker also talked about, are there gaps there? Or what are the reason do you feel that the conviction rate is never proportionate? And how could things...
So let me first start by turning this whole session around a little bit. Because when I was approached to talk over here, I had mentioned this to your people, but apparently it never traveled up the food chain. When we policemen sit down and talk about cyber security, let us first talk about securing the cyber footprint of the common man. Right? The questions you sent me were about cryptojacking, ransomware, digital infrastructure. This is for us, yes, but it is also a lot more for the ministries, for the corporate sector, for things like that. So before I start answering your question on convictions and conviction rates, I first want to talk about the basic issue, which is ransomware, cryptojacking, big identity theft, hacking into banks, the big buzzwords in all tech companies, in all tech seminars, is all about what people talk about. But 10,000 rupees gone on an OTP fraud from a daily wage earner, 1 lakh rupees gone from a pensioner is what hurts the common man. And I am yet to come across a seminar which talks about the common man. I'm sorry. I hope I'm not being offensive. But I need people here, because they are all professionals in their field, to focus on this. And it is through great networks like yours. You're a news network. There are people here from the corporate world. There are people here. That awareness of how, as General Ramesh spoke before, Ramesh Pant spoke before us, he stressed on that one word, cyber hygiene. So how do we make the common man aware of cyber hygiene? Of course, whether it's ransomware or cryptojacking or identity theft or grooming or sextortion or whatever it is, it all comes down to cyber hygiene. Hygiene of different levels, hygiene of firewalls to hygiene of not answering an unknown number that you don't recognize. So let me start by saying this. Now you wanted to know what are the gaps. I don't want to comment on the legal aspects of the problem, because there is a huge issue. And if there's anybody here from, has our friend from the Methi left after his speech? Director Saab? I think he's left. So, so there is a huge gap between IPC and the IT Act. The punishments in the IT Act need to be possibly stepped up, right? And I will not go into the judgments that have come. You're aware of that. Matters are sub judice, matters. We totally agree with what the courts are saying. But somewhere this dichotomy needs to be addressed. Only when this dichotomy is addressed, because these are the loopholes of lower punishments in the IT Act, which are used by people to get away. So when it becomes a cyber theft, it becomes different from an IPC theft. The minute it becomes different from an IPC theft, your punishment goes down. And of course, the Honorable Union Home Minister has been stressing on forensics of all sorts, whether it is physical forensics or it is cyber forensics. The forensic upgradation of the police forces in the country is taking place, and it is this upgradation which is going to add to your convictions, because the entire chain of getting the evidence and then taking it to the court. Now let's come to the next part of whether our people, the judicial officers and the prosecutors are really trained to handle what's happening. There are capacity building minuses and pluses, but a huge amount of capacity building is required. So what are we facing? We are facing a situation where, let me take you back to the COVID and the lockdown. One of the biggest effects of the lockdown, which is talked about but not really talked about, is the digitization of the financial transactions of the common man. The lockdown added hugely to everybody coming onto digital platforms for even buying basic medicines, which was not done earlier. You went to a mom and pop store, the pharmacy on the corner, and bought your medicine. Everybody went on to online shopping. Online shopping created its own vulnerabilities. So the volumes that India's digitization plan has brought about today, which is huge. One of the speakers, when I had just walked in, I think he was from the corporate world, was, I think I'm taking too much time, but I will not speak after this, was talking about the fact that 80% of Indians are happy with how the government handled digitization at the time of COVID, right? At the pandemic. So all I want to say is cyber hygiene, using awareness and tweaking of laws and capacity building is what will take not only conviction rate up, it will also bring the crime rate down. So if I may add, Guwahati, I can talk of Guwahati and all of Assam. In the last 7 months compared to the last 7 months of last year, we brought crime down in Guwahati by 48%. It's a bloody record. 48% crime doesn't come down anywhere, and there are no complaints in social media or the press about burking or hiding cases or any such thing. But cheating related to the IT Act, phone phishing, wishing, extortion through the internet has increased. Those cases have gone up. So normal crime is down, but the minimum cyber crime that affects normal people, and of course there are the big cases of banks and all that. So I rest my case. I'm sorry for taking you a little away from the topic, but अब बुढ़ापे में दिल की बात कहना तो वाजिब है ना, छोड़ नहीं सकते, जो दिल में है वो बोलना ही होता है. Thank you so much.
No, you never took away from the topic. In fact, cyber hygiene, ultimately the fundamental basis is cyber hygiene. So definitely we wanted to know about that, and also as you mentioned that there is a gap between the IPC and the IT laws. So next speaker is Jaspal Singh. I would come to you next. Again, almost a similar question. One, why is there this gap between the conviction rate and the crimes which are detected? And more importantly, you are in a state, Goa, which sees an influx of global tourists. And so the possibilities of cyber crimes on a global scale are higher. So how does Goa address that challenge, and what is your opinion on this lacuna?
First of all, taking forward what Harmeet sir said, the conviction rate in case of cyber crimes, as per the report of NCRB, is 40.5%, which is reasonable conviction rate, considering that this is a crime which doesn't take place in the physical space. And before we discuss that, we need to understand how does a traditional crime is different from cyber crime. Now, the traditional street crime takes place in lanes, roads, houses, in the four walls of houses. We maintain abundance of records about the traditional criminals, thieves, robbers, snatchers, burglars. So we are not actually groping in the dark when a traditional crime takes place. And then we can also prevent a traditional crime by temporal and spatial analysis of the crime. Temporal pattern tells us that the crime takes place between this and this hours, maximum by mapping of the crime. And the spatial pattern tells us that these areas are basically crime hotspots. So you have a certain amount of information available about crime detection, whereas cybercrime takes place in anonymous place, cyberspace, which is very nebulous, and people don't have idea. Even a trained investigator, when a cybercrime is reported, he would not have any idea. Normally in police parlance, in IT parlance, we say here geography is the history. Okay? As soon as crime takes place, that crime spot suddenly becomes a history for the cyber investigator. He doesn't know what was the origin of the crime, at what time the crime terminated. Because cyberspace is different to different people. For a student, it may be to gain knowledge, to research, whereas for a business or an industry person, it may be to make money on e-commerce, and for a cyber terrorist, it may be to damage the critical infrastructure. So everybody has different expectations from cyberspace, and it is very easy to get lost in the cyberspace because you don't know where this message is coming from. Should I click this message? Is this email genuine from the genuine sender? Is this website a genuine website? So what I mean to say is there is a lot of gap between the services which as a state or as a company, we are providing to the people digital services and the understanding of the technology behind those services. So we are a common man, as Harmeet sir was discussing, a common man is not well equipped to understand the implication of digital application, cyber application. Therefore, he is easily taken in. So that is the reason why conviction rate is low, though we consider 40.5% conviction rate a very good conviction rate, very, very good conviction rate, whereas in burglaries which take place in physical space or thefts which take place in physical space, the conviction rate is lesser than this all over India if you go by the NCRB's report. And at the same time, as I said, you don't have any physical scene of crime from where you can pick the fingerprints, from where, based on the description given by the complainant, whenever a robbery, burglary, snatching, murder takes place, at least people have a fairly good idea about the perpetrator. उसका description ऐसा था, उसकी शक्ल ऐसी थी, he was speaking this kind of language. But when a cyber crime takes place, you are totally groping in the dark. You only have to follow the digital footsteps, time logs, time spans, and it's a very, very complex and tardy investigation process. So therefore, we should give due credit to the investigators that despite these handicaps, because in several states there may not be cyber crime labs, so they may not have access to certain applications, certain tools to investigate the cyber crime. But nevertheless, we still have performed very well. And coming to Goa, yes, it is a very iconic tourist destination. Several million people visit, but that doesn't lead to cybercrime, but basically credit and debit card frauds. And we recently we advise the banking system, those who have installed the ATMs, to at least have some kind of system in place whereby if anybody tries to illegally interfere, other than inserting the card and pressing the code, if anybody tries to illegally interfere the ATM, they should get a message. So some of the banks have listened to us and they have drastically reduced the crime so far as ATM frauds are concerned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So you basically very hit the nail on the head that in cyber crimes, the provenance of the crime itself is not very certain, and that ambiguity leads to certain challenges. Amit Sinha, I'll come to you next. And my question is, which even the previous speakers touched upon, post-COVID, the speed of digitization has increased, and that has automatically, the moment digitization increased, more common man involved in digital transactions or other activities, and the cases, the cyber crimes have also increased. So from an Uttarakhand perspective, how do you see the thing, and what are the actions that you are undertaking so that more and more of these convictions happen?
See, Uttarakhand obviously is a small state, and post-COVID digitization has grown to, it has become a very big domain. Rather, in Uttarakhand, as initially sir said, that we have to look at the poor man perspective. So, adding to it, in Uttarakhand we have around 16,000 VLEs, village level entrepreneurs, the CSC people. And our plan is to make them cyber warriors, because at least they are the ones who can reach upon to the villagers. They are the only person who can actually talk to the villagers. Whatever type of, even we go to channels, we do a lot of cyber hygiene posters, we spend a lot of money on these things, but we don't actually try to tell them how to become a proper cyber hygiene monitor. So they are the best persons. So we have picked them, and in fact, we have requested our government also to at least give some remuneration to them, token amount, and it is only about having sessions with the villagers. ग्राम पंचायत में एक है तो वो ग्राम पंचायत में जाके एक बार सेशन कर ले, 20 लोगों को बिठा के उसके एक फोटोग्राफ खींच के भेज दे, उसमें उसको कुछ पैसे मिल जाएगा। तो ये एक प्रपोजल है जिसमें कि एक्चुअली when you see these things will help, and it is like a policing, because policing the result you just can't see. If everything is going fine, that means police is doing its duty, but it's actually not visible. You just quantify, you can't quantify it. Similarly in cyber hygiene, I mean, if a village level entrepreneur is going to a village and teaching somebody not to answer a spam call, or not to click a particular button, or not to give your OTP to anybody, that's it. I mean, but he has to tell, or she has to tell these things lots of times. So this will create awareness, and that is the basic thing. Because see, this cyber world is divided between two things: hacking versus cyber frauds. Hacking is a big thing, and maybe it's actually important, but it's a different vertical. Exactly. And there are people, and mostly we spend our time, as sir said, mostly we spend our time on countering cyber hacking things rather than dealing with the cyber fraud. So I think these initiatives can play well. Thank you.
Two very important points. One, obviously, yes, hacking is critical, but cyber frauds which involve common citizens, as sir also said, that's important. And another wonderful thing that you mentioned about involving the locals, that really is involving them. It's like even in normal policing, we have these special polices and civic polices. So it's like that involving the VLEs. Great initiative. We will come next to Rohit Rajbir Singh, Arunachal Pradesh, another small state but very sensitive in terms of location, being in an international border and always in the news. So what is your experience in terms of the extent of cyber crimes that are happening in Arunachal, and as a law enforcer, what are you doing to counter those challenges?
Rohit, if I can butt in, you have a very big case and you know where the VPN was. So in fact, why don't you tell everybody about what it's not just groping in the dark. The VPN comes from a fifth country, not even a third country. What do you do about it? So Rohit can maybe, without going into the details of the personalities involved, mention some of that.
Right, sir.
He did a very big case recently.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this opportunity. And so in the Arunachal Pradesh perspective, I think I'll definitely come to sir's point in a bit, just to give a bit of a background. So you'll be very surprised to know that the extent of cyber frauds in Arunachal Pradesh is way too much that you can probably imagine sitting in a discussion or in a chamber. There are multifarious reasons for it. The most important reason, what I feel, is that, so just to give you a perspective, that in right about 2.5 years, we've received around 550 registered complaints of cyber frauds in the order of cyber financial frauds, then sextortion, and then impersonation, in this order. And so it may not seem like much, but you see that in a populace of around 11 to 12 lakhs people all over the state, and 550 registered complaints. Why I'm saying registered? Because we still live in an age in Arunachal Pradesh where people do not have digital connectivity, let alone mobile signals. Like, there are some places which have infrastructural deficits also, so road connectivity is also not there. And place 4G, 3G, these technologies are not even heard of in some parts. So basic 2G connectivity is also not there in some places. So consider that as one of the factors, and then considering this fact, also try to understand that 550 registered complaints is why is it such a big number? Because, you know, I'll just give you a small example. If a person goes from place A to B, now at place A he has no connectivity, and then he travels to place B, and he suddenly receives a call, because obviously there's some signal in place B. He receives a call and a simple minor OTP fraud happens with him. He will not be able to react to it at all. So we all talk about cyber hygiene and cyber awareness also, and through multiple awareness campaigns, we've got this in the minds of the people that never share your OTPs. So he will, if you ask him, he may be able to tell you that, yes, I've heard this thing that never share your OTP, but he'll not be able to tell you what an OTP is. So that is the kind of populace that we deal with. And so that is why awareness, yes, it's very important, but it holds a very limited advantage as far as Arunachal Pradesh is concerned. Second thing, coming to what Sir just mentioned, so we are investigating. We've made some breakthroughs in a case that we were handling, in which I don't think that any part of the country is not affected by that crime. It's impersonation of even constitutional authorities, institution and major institutional heads, political leaders, and even some industry leaders, police enforcement agencies, top hierarchy, and administrative officers. So this is a fraud that we're dealing with. I think all the states are dealing with. What we made a breakthrough is that we've, so these frauds are not originating from our country per se. So there are VPNs used, and these are originating from, as Sir said, not a third but a fifth country, some nondescript areas in the continent of Africa, without going into the details. So these are the kinds of frauds that we deal with. These are the kinds of multi-level fraudulent actors that are present in the country. So one of their components will be in the country. For example, I'll just state one of the leads that we followed. Sir is also aware of the same. That a WhatsApp account of let's say a senior officer or a political leader was impersonated, and that number was a real number from which messages were flowing through. I also got a message. Many people in our hierarchy got the message. He was impersonating one of our officers only. We traced that back. It was a real number, and it belonged to one of an auto rickshaw drivers in Dimapur in Nagaland. Similar numbers were also traced, and they got traced back to a nondescript small village in Rajasthan, a place in Vizag, and a small town, not even town, I mean a small shanty maybe in Kanpur. So these are the major four actors that we were able to involve in this case as the first level of fraudulent activity. After interrogation, what we came to know was that they were not aware of this number, that this number was on their names, their KYCs were used, they were not aware of that. So by use of fake KYCs, those numbers were taken by some other actor. So that is the second level. Now we reached to that level also, and what we got to know was that these people are also not the ones that are using these numbers to propagate these fraudulent activities. There's a third level that is present not in our country, in some other country, who are using VPNs to forward these messages, and via these actors that are here, they are propagating the impersonation fraud. So I'm just trying to tell you that the levels involved in an investigation, as Sir Jaspal sir also stated before, that it's a very complex investigation. More than that, it's a young man's investigation. Like for us, like for supervisory officers, talking about these things makes sense here. But for investigators, if you give this investigation to an ASI rank officer who spent around 25 to 28 years in the investigative field, he'll be a top-notch investigator if traditional crimes are concerned. But for investigations in the cyber world, he's not that cut out. And we have realized this through times, but I just feel that we are very slow in making this insight as a part of our DNA, that the law also says that investigators in cyber frauds, as of now, have to be inspector ranked officers. So in some states, you can get inspectors of if they're recruited from sub-inspectors, then you can get inspectors after 10 years of service, after 12 years of service. Some small states like us, maybe in 4 to 5 years of service. But even then, those form only some part of our hierarchy. There is a part wherein the people who get, recruited at the constable rank, they give exams, they become head constables, and then ASIs, and then sub-inspectors. Later on, inspectors also. Those are not at all cut out for investigations. So we have to recognize that. We have to train our young officers, even young constables who are coming in, especially Arunachal Pradesh. Like I must tell you, I find that, so I run a small unit called the Cyber Crimes Unit, also as SP Cybercrime in Arunachal Pradesh. What I've realized is that more than the inspectors, which are entrusted to do the investigative work, and who do, whose names are there on the case files, right about 5 to 8% of work is done by them. Mostly the newer age, the newly recruited constables, head constables who are there, they are the ones doing all the OSINT mapping. They're the ones who are interacting with major industry leaders, with grievance officers of major social networking portals also, getting the data. Also, this is one part, interacting with the complainants, making them aware that we are doing this, making them understand that this is a process that we are going through. Even the cyber financial frauds portal in my state is run by a head constable, because he is able to correctly state what he will be able to do, and also correctly state what he will not be able to do.
True.
So I think these are some of the things that we're working on, and that we need to discuss, and even at whatever levels it is required, bring this in the national consciousness that it is required as of now. Thank you.
Great. So in fact, you touched upon the important, the story that sounds like I shouldn't mention this story, it sounds like sci-fi really. But the important part is the training part, and with the next speaker I'll come to George with that part only. Training, yes, true, while the newer generation, younger generation, they are more cyber savvy, so they will be more attuned to training, but end of the day, for higher conviction, we need to have overall sense of training. Otherwise, how would you inculcate those cyber hygiene things among citizens? So, as an organization which helps in providing cybersecurity training to government departments and law enforcement agencies, how are you looking at this?
Yeah, so let me introduce myself. I'm George Kuruvilla. I'm CMD of BECIL, Broadcast Engineering Consultant India Limited. Though it's a broadcast public sector under Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, but in the last 6 years we diversified into all technology-based projects. And we realized that it's a very converged world. We handle audio and video, but now it is IT, audio, video, telecom, everything is a converged world. So we have to be part of all the technology areas. And that is how we started working on the cybersecurity space as well. And we made a cyber forensic lab in our office in Noida, Sector 62, for cyber forensic for devices like mobile, laptop, where data is, is deleted. We can get it back. We have those tools and techniques to do that. So a forensic lab which was inaugurated by General Pant, whom we heard him some time back. And so we are now into this space. So the Ministry of Home Affairs approached us to provide cyber forensic experts for various activities of Home Ministry for the IC4. So we did this assessment, where to find. As you said, it was so difficult to have, to search and to interview and to shortlist and to provide it to the Home Ministry, these cyber experts, because first of all, availability is very less. And number two, if they are available, their demand is very high. So they have to be paid a high monthly fee or remunerations. So Home Ministry gave us a good amount for monthly payments to this contract staff that we've hired, and because of that we could hire a good number of 50 people for the IC4, and they are still working with the Ministry of Home Affairs. And so we started getting into the command and control centers to make command and control centers, so we are doing that. So as you rightly said, so one is that to have the right people, the awareness, that is the training part of it, to have the cyber ranges across the country in the universities and in the institutions, the training institutions, where through the cyber ranges, cases can be simulated on the cyber ranges, and the officers and the staffs can be trained on that. And you have to bring the real life cases that's happening across the country and the world, and train the officer and make them aware that this is the kind of threat that comes in. So when we have started working on the security operation centers for the cooperative banks, because they do not have good forensics, or for that matter the awareness, because they are in rural areas, and as per the RBI direction they all have to be digitized. Once they are digitized, then they are into the network environment, they are vulnerable to attacks, and because it handles money and rural money and cooperative banks, it's so difficult for them to protect themselves from these kinds of attack. So we have started working on security operation centers for them, and we are already working with the OEMs, we are working with the partners, together with whom, the data centers with whom we can work together to create centers where we can do the cyber forensics. So it has got three parts. One is of course the reactive, something happens, you go after it. The other is of course the preventive part of it. So we focus more onto it, so that we are able to find out what are the kinds of hacking or the cyber threat that's happening. So there are different tools by which it's gathered that okay, a particular institution or a particular bank, what are kinds of attack it is facing over a period of time. And on that basis, again, the tools are developed how to mitigate those kinds of attack. It's an ongoing process. It's a process that every time it has to go on. It will not stop till the digital world is there. We have to continue to learn and create solutions to mitigate the threat and further work it on. So we cannot 100% sanitize those attacks, but we can do ourselves, as we have already heard, that awareness, the capacity building, that is training, and thereafter developing those tools how to handle these kinds of attack. So as per the statistics that we have, normally in an attack, within 24 hours, nearly 70% of the data is taken out. And the response time in 24 hours is less than 3, you can say, 3%, is the response time. So you can imagine that 3% of data, the response time in 24 hours is so less. By that time, the data is already gone. And thereafter it is just, that as we already heard, it is going after those digital trails, which is not easy, and it will take long time to get it. And therefore, as we heard, poor people losing their money to get back, though of course there are rules now, the banks have to pay to them. But even then, it is not easy in many places, and particularly in corporate bank kind of situations who do not have those kinds of robust digital trails as well. So, so this task we have taken, and we are available as a government company that wherever we can be of help, and if a problem statement is there, if you are invited, we can try to work out with various OEM vendors. Our job is basically to become an interface between a pure government organization or department and the technology partners that are available in the country and across the world, who have got the tools and wherewithals, and to also stitch 3-4 different kinds of technologies together to bring out a solution as required by a particular situation.
Exactly. Thank you. So you touched upon a very important point, this continual process, because it's a very dynamic scenario. Kartik Hegadekati, I'll come to you, and very interesting when we are talking about technologies like blockchain and those now being used by law enforcement agencies. We have moved a long way from the time. I remember about 2 decades back when I think it was in Chhattisgarh or some other state, when the courts asked the police to attach the evidence and there were those cyber floppies. So someone tried to staple a cyber floppy and then present those documents in court. From there to blockchain. So how are these emerging technologies being leveraged in cybersecurity by law enforcement agencies, and how is the training part of them? How the personnel are trained properly in these emerging technologies?
Yeah. First of all, I thank APAC for giving this wonderful opportunity to discuss with this esteemed panel. The question that you asked, I think, is very pertinent in the present day. Let me give you a small anecdote to just illustrate this point. There was a website, a dark net website called Silk Road, on which you could buy, anyone could buy, using the normal internet. You need not even use Tor network or any kind of VPN. You could buy drugs, you could buy guns, gun running, drug smuggling, all that stuff. And the payment was in bitcoins. The payment was in cryptocurrencies. Then, to a great extent, Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies got this bad reputation that they are used for all of these illegal things, and payments can be done across the borders without getting caught. But strangely, blockchain provided a solution where hard currency could not. Now, if a payment is done in hard currency, you can never trace it. You can never ever trace it unless the payer or the payee themselves, they turn themselves in. What happened was, there was a guy called Walter Ulbricht who used to run this Silk Road website. This happened somewhere in 2011-12. And this guy, he used to take the payments in Bitcoin and run the entire show. He was sitting somewhere in Europe, and this network ran across the world. He did a mistake on the blockchain. What he did was, there was another guy who was trying to set up a similar such website, and this Walter Ulbricht wanted him killed. So he hired an assassin, okay, and he paid the assassin in bitcoins. Now this assassin, he went to kill the opponent and got caught. When he was caught, he did not reveal anything, but the FBI seized a series of hard disks and cache from him, and they could successfully, through interrogation, get out the private key. And they traced that private key. Now, let me give you one clincher that IP addresses are not recorded on the blockchain. All of you have heard of Bitcoin, all of you have heard of blockchain. To keep it simple, let me state that IP addresses are not recorded on the blockchain. But they could map the public address, the wallet address, to this guy, Ulbricht, and they could succeed in getting a conviction for him, and even today he is in jail. So now the question arises, is blockchain or Bitcoin a good thing or a bad thing? There are papers written on it. I myself have done research on this, and it has been shown in many simulations that blockchain provides a better chance of traceability than normal hard cash. Next to banking transactions. Of course, banking transactions are conducted in a very secure environment, so it's totally black and white. But here, in this case, it provides a better chance of traceability. So, when it comes to blockchain, it has several applications. This was the background I wanted to give about the application of blockchain in law enforcement and cybersecurity. Now, the unique thing about blockchain is that the records are immutable. You cannot change or tamper the records, you can only view them. This provides a very unique innovation in the world of jurisprudence. There is a new kind of innovation called as proof of existence. You mentioned, a very pertinent example that in the earlier days, they used to staple floppy disks to the evidence. You can do exactly this on the blockchain, but without the data getting affected. Let me give you an example. A crime has occurred, maybe a murder, and the object of the crime, that is the knife or the revolver, the forensic team will tag it, and they will give it a particular identity on the blockchain. Just like me and you have a bank account, me and you can have a wallet address on the blockchain, very unique to us. Not only us, even this bottle can have a wallet address to its name. I can enlist a wallet address attached to the identity of this bottle in some way. I will some barcode or something, and I will rent this bottle to someone, and they will pay me, and that will go to the wallet address of this bottle. This is possible. So a unique identity of the object of crime can be created on the blockchain. And once it is registered on the blockchain, it is immutable evidence that that object of crime was there. Now, many times we have seen in the films also, and it will be true, our seniors here will watch for it, that the object of crime has disappeared at the time of presentation in the court. This can never happen if the proof of existence, this is called the proof of existence. So this is one innovation. Then there are several such innovations in the blockchain world. So a lot of innovations are possible. We are going towards Web 3.0. Metaverse is already here. The first crime on the metaverse has already happened. There was a molestation case that happened on the metaverse, and it was also the complaint was given, and the UK police did not know what action to take. So this is the world we are going in, and I think blockchain will have a very big role to play in this, with a lot of innovations coming in. Yeah.
Great, thanks. So you talked about the future, basically where, as you mentioned, blockchain provides immutable evidence. But however, I think there is still time for the law, the jurisdiction to sort of recognize some of these evidences. So before we conclude, I'll come to each panelist now. 1 minute to each, and please stick to that 1 minute. One critical thing which you feel should happen in the cybersecurity and the cybercrime roadmap, India should follow in the immediate future. One critical suggestion that you would like to give, and I'll start with you, Harmeet sir.
I already actually said it in the couple of things that I said in my little opening kind of thing. Simple. We have to look at the laws from the perspective of the future. Our laws are still attuned to what Jaspal called the physical world of crime. Sure. So one is that. Second, of course, is hygiene, and third is capacity building. Because the government is doing, you want me to use this? Yeah, sorry. You want me to start all over again? No. So, as I said, one is rejigging, calibrating the laws in such a way that we are looking at the future, because at the speed at which the cyber world is growing and the digital footprint is going, the legal world, the legal aspects have to match up to that. Then comes capacity building, which we've spoken about. And of course, let me say that the Cyber Swachhta, the IC4, which you're working on, the security agencies have a safe platform. There's a lot happening in the central government, which is percolating down to us. So alongside, we need the capacity building for what Rohit said, are guys at the cutting edge level to be able to use those technologies and the help that they can get. So hygiene, capacity and laws. I think we are a country that's sailing in the digital world. We're possibly the leaders in the world. Till today, everybody used to talk about the fact that, CEO of such and such is ours and CEO and such is ours. They forget that down to the last man, the guy is an Indian, and the digital users in India are the maximum in the world.
Exactly.
So we are a leader in digital technology today, and we've started at a greenfield. We didn't have to recreate what somebody set up in the 70s. So we are going great guns. So these three things, and I think we are sailing. And what George here is doing, this kind of stuff is really going to take us forward. I think it's yours
Great.
now.
So basically, as one of the earlier speakers today mentioned, the India is leapfrogging, and as you mentioned, the three important points: the hygiene, the capacity building, and the laws to match with the modern era. So
Just to add, the capacity building is happening a lot right here in Delhi, and at the big spaces, it has to now percolate down.
percolate. Okay, Jaspal, I'll come to you.
Yeah. I would say that the cyberspace is created by engineers and it is used by masses. Masses varying from what Rohit said, illiterate, semi-literate, highly qualified, doctorate, scientists. So we have to ensure that there is a sustained awareness about the various flip sides of technological products. Because whenever any scientific innovation is marketed, so people say all good things about them. There are a number of technology solution providers who visit us, talk about their technology products, but they never talk about the way in which it can be misused. So this is the time, like we said, Jago, Grahak, Jago. So this is a time to say Jago, netizens, Jago. So therefore sustained awareness is the key to ensure that cybercrime is contained. So far as capacity building is concerned, Government of India, Ministry of Information and Technology, state governments, police training colleges, academies, they are doing their best to educate their investigating officers in variety of areas, cloud computing, cyber forensics, computer forensics, and number of training programs have been organized. And IC4 is also doing a yeoman's service. And similarly, the BPRND has set up a National Cybercrime Research Center and Innovation Center, which have conducted a number of webinars for our investigating officer, where experts from the industry and the academic institutions, they come and discuss. And we also need to enable the police academies in setting up cybercrime labs. And though police modernization is doing its bit, but the state governments also need to urgently attend to this problem, because as of now the maximum funds are coming from the central government.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in one way, more training and the scaling up. Amit Sinha, your views.
I think digital space is the new alphabet now. I mean, still the education system, the primary education, because mostly we have seen that cyber is not a topic there. So everybody is using WhatsApp since its beginning. I mean, 6 years, 7 years, kid, they're using it. But how to use it properly is never taught in schools. So I think this should be somewhere taken into account. That's it.
Thanks. Rohit.
Sir, I think in my opinion, we need to inculcate a behavioral change. We should stop victimizing the victim. I think that is one thing that we should do. Any cyber fraud, it's a very scary fraud, I would say. You know, if it happens with you, let's not talk about anybody else. If it happens with you, and if some solution is not provided to you within an hour or 2 hours, you'll lose complete faith in whatever agency there is, be it law enforcement, be it your banking intermediary, anything. You'll lose complete faith in the institutions that are there. So if a person who's defrauded through any cyber means, if he comes to the police or if he goes to the bank, and if they are not able to, you know, tell him properly what is to be done, and also, you know, if they're not able to reassure him that they'll try to help him or they'll try to do whatever they can, it's very hard on the victim. And also, you know, it's not that they can and they are not doing it. It's because of lack of knowledge with them also. We've spoken to plethora of banking officers also at various levels. They are not very clear about what their SOP is while any cyber fraud has taken place. So I think this is one thing that we need to work upon. We need to stop victimizing the victim that is already there.
So victimizing the victim is what Rohit Rajbir Singh is saying, and that is a very critical aspect. George, your
So I think I'll agree with all the other speakers. Is basically the capacity building, the training part of it, using the technology to understand what are the tools that we need to have, and to train our manpower. So we find that 40% of the frauds happen just because we are not aware of that our password should be robust enough. And so having a weak password is one reason where nearly 40% of those attacks are happening. 30% of the times it is basically because we are, we have opened a particular, a mail, not knowing, of course, it's not easy also, but opening, the attachment along with it, that, by which we are, compromised already, and thereafter they attack it. So nearly 70%, if awareness is there, people are aware, I think the 70% can be, saved because of that. So awareness, training, capacity building, I would say.
I would like to highlight two verticals on which we might need to do more. One is at the level of the common man. 4 Ps we need to publicize and make everyone aware. 4 Ps: passwords, pen drives, phishings, and power cables. These are the 4 vulnerabilities, right? Now, password you need to keep changing from time to time. Then pen drives, I mean, जो भी पेन ड्राइव मिला उसको मत डालो, उसको एंटीवायरस चेक करो. देन फिशिंग, बी केयरफुल ऑफ फिशिंग, डोंट क्लिक एनी लिंक्स, बी डोंट पिक अप अननोन कॉल्स. पावर केबल्स, कहीं भी जाओगे, बस स्टेशन, बस में, प्लेन में, एयरपोर्ट्स, just don't plug in the power cable, be careful, that can also be proxies. So these are the 4 P's, these are the common man level, which is very, very important. Another one is at the national or international level, where we need to take care of national cyber security. And for that, we need to encourage higher level research into quantum computing. Quantum computing is the way to go forward. Believe it or not, quantum encryption, quantum decryption has arrived. Post-quantum encryption will be the buzzword in the next few years. And once we start getting expertise in quantum computing, it will trickle down to the common man level and at all levels. So we need to focus on that. We have enough of intellectual power and the manpower to do it. So these are my suggestions.
Great. So 2 important things. One, from the common man's perspective, which is practically doable immediately. And obviously, we have to look at the advanced technologies like quantum computing in the future. Great. So thanks. That was a very insightful and interesting session on different aspects of cybercrime and cybersecurity. I would like to now call upon stage Mr. Shobhi Goswami, co-founder of APAC News Network, to hand over a token of appreciation to all the panelists. Jaspal Singh. Amit Sinha. Rohit Rajbir Singh. George Kuruvilla. Karthik Hegadekar.